John Cowan joins us on the program. Did you have those conversations with well-meaning aunts when you were a teenager, John?
Yes, they ask you all the time, and I have seen evidence, or a survey, that showed it is the least preferred conversation started with teenagers. They would rather talk about anything than answer that question because it assumes you know.
Yeah.
And I had no idea. And so I would, when they said, "What are you going to do when you leave school?" I wanted to say drugs, but I never actually had the cheek to say that.
Well, actually, ironically, ended up working in a hospital
Well, yeah, I
as a
guess I was
scientist, so
working.
you were working with
Yeah.
drugs, but in a very different way, in a much more socially acceptable way, perhaps.
I still get asked questions a bit like that. What are you going to do in your retirement? And I
Oh,
say,
yeah.
oh, I've got a door-to-door leg waxing business. And then I sort of lean back and look at their legs and say, would you like a card? And that usually ends that conversation
Yeah.
fairly quickly too. But I actually settled on the answer quantity surveyor.
Okay.
And the adults would look rather startled and sort of nod approvingly. I knew they didn't know what a quantity surveyor was. I
Exactly.
certainly didn't, but it had provided an off-ramp for that embarrassing conversation. Because they kept on asking, I thought, well, perhaps young people should know, but they don't know.
Yeah.
And the reason they don't know what career they've got ahead of them is because they don't know themselves. And so a much better conversation to have with the young people is one where you ask them about their sport,
Hmm.
their interests, or their clubs, what they believe in, or just a conversation to get to know them. Because not only are you getting to know them, a conversation like that helps a young person get to know themselves. It clarifies for themselves what their interests are, and I think that's probably the best insight into what's going to be a rewarding career. Too much career advice is around about what jobs are out there, whereas I think far better career advice is finding out about yourself,
Yeah.
about what your passion is, and where your heart is, and everything like that. Of course, we can advise young people about where there's going to be good money to be made or, growth industries and things like that. But
Hmm.
honestly, if it doesn't push their buttons, if it's not going to be something that gives them pleasure over their lifetime, are we really doing them a favor?
Although, to be fair, John, the answer to that question for a lot of young people, particularly those who are struggling to find work at the moment, is that they just wish to be employed. I mean, we can make a big thing of, self-actualization and, wouldn't it be great to be paid to do what you love doing anyway, but actually being unemployed can be pretty miserable. Sometimes you need to start doing something you don't like and get paid to compensate for that, perhaps.
Look, the great advantage of being a unrealistic romantic like myself is that I can counter arguments like that and say, no, still go for the dream.
Yeah.
Still go for what's going to make your heart beat. Life is too short to waste it doing things you don't want to do.
Hmm.
I heard a story about a person that became a lawyer, mainly to keep his parents happy.
Hmm.
And he abandoned that law career later in life and went and worked in forestry and loved it so much. Perhaps it's good to work in a variety of things and get a few things under your belt and something to fall back on.
Yeah.
And all work is noble and I believe that. And you can say that the job market is so hard, you should take what you can get. But I think that um, you should go with your heart. Now,
Mm.
my dream when I was young, really, when I left school, was to marry into royalty.
Okay.
But Princess Stephanie of Monaco didn't even answer my letters, so I had to settle on a plan B,
She
and
missed
that
out, John.
was
She really missed out on that one. Although I think you would have settled with the Princess of Monaco. The wife that you ended up with is much better than her anyway.
I think so, absolutely so. But my plan B was to find someone who would pay me to do the stuff I wanted to do anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
And I mentioned about those conversations you can have with young people. And if someone had had a conversation with me back in the 1970s, if they could push past my primitive um, personal hygiene and my inarticulate grunting to actually have a conversation with me, they would have found out that I was passionate about science, that I loved photography, that I had a growing interest in the church, and that I had an interest in people. They'd find out that I kept funny notebooks and did cartoons and things like that. Honestly, an insightful adult could possibly have unearthed the seeds of every career that I've really, really enjoyed.
Yeah.
And I have really enjoyed the different things that I've done. I mean, those passions were, as I say, the seeds of a long career I had in making movies and working in media and photography, a long career in working in Christian organizations and things that aligned with my beliefs, working in science. All my interests that I had back then directed me into ultimate careers that I loved. Now, in every one of those jobs, there were things that I didn't like.
Yeah.
I heard someone say that you should think of like the traffic light system. Every job is going to have red light stuff, orange light stuff, and green light stuff. Red light stuff is stuff you hate.
Yeah.
And for me, that was doing things like writing reports or sitting in a boring meeting or struggling with a pay system that wasn't all that great or something. Red light stuff
Yeah.
you don't like about the job. Orange light stuff is stuff you do. It doesn't really excite you all that much. But green light stuff is the stuff that you really love about the job, the things that you would do even if you weren't getting paid.
Yeah.
And I'd have to say that most of my jobs that I've had in my life have been brilliantly emerald green.
Wow.
From just about all of it. I've loved doing the things that I do. And I think that life is too short not to go for green.
I think
If your job is less than 60% green, I'd say start checking
around looking for
getting
something
your
else.
CV together.
And perhaps you're a good example of this, actually, because even though you say that you were pretty much green for all of those jobs, that you have done a variety of jobs. And again, perhaps the thing is maybe you won't land on your perfect job one, but keep your mind and your options open in that regard. I think a good measure for whether or not you're doing the right job, John, is if you wake up in the morning and you feel unwell, what comes up in your heart? Are you thinking, oh no, I'm not feeling well enough to go to work. How disappointed I'm feeling. Or is there a little bit of a yippee in your heart? I think that's a really good measure of whether or not you've got the right career, whether you've got a green light career. But hey, as always, we appreciate your wisdom and your input on this topic. Thanks for joining us, John.
Thank you. Cheers.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.